Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to ORAR's April Community Gathering, and we're really glad that you're here with us. I'm Ifeoluwa, and today I'm here with our co-founders, Dr. Motolani Adedipe and Dr. Otito Iwuchukwu. They each have a decade and 2 decades of diaspora experience, respectively. And today, we're sitting together around something a lot of us know personally, but don't always get to talk about openly: culture shock, and what it actually takes to find your people when you're far from home. A few quick things before we start. One, this is a safe space. What's shared here stays here. Number two, use the chat, drop your thoughts, reactions, questions. We're reading. And number three, we're recording. So if you need to step away, you won't miss anything. That's it for today. No big agenda, just an honest conversation with people who get it. Let's get into it. Dr. Mo, let's start with you.
Hello. Thanks for
Hello.
having me. Yeah.
I'm glad to have you here, Ma.
Thank you.
So, I want to throw a question to both of you. I know both of you have had experiences diaspora for a long time, so I don't think this topic is new for any one of you. So, I think it's going to be a very interesting conversation today. So, to both Dr. Otito and Dr. Mutalani, I just want to ask you, like, from your own view and from your experiences, what would you say culture shock is, and what
So
it
I think Dr. Motolani will have a very recent view of this because she's had to do different forms of migration. So she's more versed in this, I would say. I've only had to immigrate one time.
Yeah.
So over to you, Dr. Mo.
There's culture shock and there's reverse culture shock. Culture shock. I think I'll define it as what happens when your internal compass stops working the way it used to be, right? Like everything you've known, how to greet people, how to read a room, how to belong, suddenly doesn't translate. And yeah, so I would say those are just like broad examples of culture shock. And you think that the older you get, the more wizened you'll be about things like that. But I think the humbling thing is that we're still scholars in life, right? So that said, the ability to bounce back, to be resilient, to adjust and give yourself grace and also give others grace, right? Yeah, so that's culture shock, right? And I would say also, before I hand it over to you, I would say it's not a phase you push through, it's just what happens when you as a whole human being find yourself in a whole new world. And no matter how old you are, especially when you're old, I think you're more, you kind of know that this is culture shock. But imagine for kids, they have no idea. They just keep going, right? The older you get, the more aware you are about culture shock, in my opinion. So yeah, that would be my response to it.
That's interesting. So that brings me to the idea of, the level of disorientation that third culture kids, like you said,
Yeah.
might be having, but not having an
The
idea of what it
vocabulary
is
or the
until,
language,
until they
yeah,
grow up, right? So, for
yeah.
people who are listening, third culture kids or the third culture person is somebody who was born and raised in different cultures, right? So born in one culture, raised in another one, and still moving. So this will be people of diplomats and things like that. And I always say too that because it's a culture-oriented thing, it doesn't even have to do with countries. It doesn't have to be, at the country level. If I think about our own country, where we're coming from, and how big and diverse that country is, just moving from the north to the east, or from the east, to the west, you do experience it. It's just like in our case, we kind of muscle through. And also it's easier because everyone looks like you. You can ask questions. There will always be a brother or sister to kind of, help you walk through. So I think that's what also distinguishes it from the country level kind where you're moving completely, sometimes across oceans, like we had to do,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, to a new country with a new way of life. And I
Yeah.
think what I want to point out here is that the books and the movies, it's not like they don't help, but it's different, right? There's something about watching something or reading about it and then
Yeah.
experiencing it, in real life, as they say. So yeah, right. I don't think there's anything I want to add to that. I really like what you defined, as culture
Yeah.
shock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also want to, as we are talking, a thought just came to my
Mm-hmm.
head about
Mm-hmm.
economic, migration,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when you move from a lower, because my first major move, okay, I've moved around a lot, but my first defining move was when I moved from Nigeria to the US, right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there was that excitement of moving somewhere where it was more affluent,
Yeah.
but what wasn't really addressed until I came to the US. Of course, I realized I was black when I moved to the US, but it's also that
Mm.
disorientation and the exhausting performance that comes with it,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
and the loneliness too, right?
Yeah.
Also the guilt, which is why I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
us in the beginning we kind of gave into the black tax, You were the
Mm-hmm.
one who made it out of the
Yeah.
whole bunch,
Survivor's guilt.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 And I think
Yeah.
the racial stress, which
Mm-hmm.
moving to Korea was so totally different, and maybe we can
Mm-hmm.
talk about that. But I just wanted to pinpoint the economic migration and just the additional stressors that come with it. Depending on
Yeah.
either you're moving from a higher income context to a lower income one and
Mm-hmm.
vice versa.
Mm-hmm. 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 I mean, I'm glad you're saying that because that lets you know the different types, I would say, of culture shock that exist. And you use the word disorientation, which is interesting because I just saw you right in Seoul. And coming back, I remember everyone is asking me, how does it feel? And I said, disorientation was real. Not just
Mm,
even though I knew I was coming, it was a short stay and I was coming back, but that was
mm.
still a high level of disorientation because, the language is not the
Language
same.
for you. Yeah,
The
yeah,
time
yeah,
difference, right? There's a whole 13,
yeah,
14-hour
yeah.
time difference. So
And
it
the
was
cultural
very disorienting.
nuances, yeah,
You
yeah,
know, but at the
yeah.
back of my mind was the idea that, okay, I'm coming back soon enough. But imagine having to live there and having to be aware of that day in, day out for a while, because it takes you a little while to
Takes a while. It takes a
get
while.
used
It
to
takes
it.
a while.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Because I remember
yeah.
when I moved myself, it was the language. I remember thinking, I can't believe these people are speaking English, like in many cases, because I
Yeah.
just couldn't hear what people were saying, even though they were
Yes.
speaking
It spoke
English,
so
right? It took
fast.
me.
Yes, it spoke so fast. Yeah, yeah.
But then they
I
consider
mean,
you to be a
yeah.
fast talker, right? So you can imagine that
Right,
sense
right.
of
Me, fast
orientation
talker when you
too.
guys talk so fast. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So that took a whole minute just to get used to it. And I see the value. I mean, we're gonna go later into that, but I see the value of how many, many times the people from the East do this. And I used to wonder, but now I see it where you kind
Bring
of delve
somebody.
deep into not even somebody, you delve deep into the
Mm,
TV programs, right? Cartoons and
mm.
all these kinds of
Oh,
things. It's
yeah,
so you
yeah,
can pick
yeah.
up on the diction
Yes.
quicker, right? Than just hearing people.
Talk,
So
yeah.
it's a form of immersion, immersing yourself in the language that is being used
Mm-hmm,
just so
mm-hmm,
you get it.
mm-hmm,
I think
mm-hmm.
if I were to do any kind of movement again where, I had to learn the way that people spoke, I would do this because it's a real tactic that can be
Mm,
used. But I think we'll get
mm.
to that later in the conversation. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Next question.
Okay, ma. It was really interesting to hear people talk about speaking fast.
Mhm. Yeah,
Definitely, yes.
yeah.
And some people are like, "You speak too fast. Are you talking to me?" I'm like, "Yes." So I can't imagine someone outside saying I speak fast, and I'm like, "You also speak fast. We don't understand each other." So the
Yeah.
next question, kind of like what Dr. Otito talked about, was the different types of culture shock. So
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's culture shock of like, okay, like the new country, what you're seeing in the new
Mm-hmm.
country, maybe like amenities,
Mm-hmm.
structures, and all that. Then
Mm-hmm.
there's the
Mm-hmm.
culture shock of, oh, I want to work here. How am I supposed to go about this? What's the different way
Mm-hmm.
to go about this? Then there's the
Mm-hmm.
identity culture shock. It's like, okay, now I've moved. Am I going to
Mm-hmm.
act like a black person in this new country, or do I have
Mm-hmm.
to act like a white person, or the way the people of this country act now?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I would like any of you to just dive into all those kind of culture shocks, including like the way the social life is, the way they relate to each other, the way they
Mm-hmm.
organize themselves, and the way you go about things. Like,
Okay, I could go first. I'll speak from the professional side because again, finished school in Nigeria, then came here to go to school again. And it was very opposite, right? It took it took a while because one came into grad school. So the professors many times are like, call me by name, right? Because everyone called each other by name. But that was the weirdest thing. I still don't do it, even to my mentor till tomorrow. I still call him
Same here.
doctor
Same here.
because it's so weird to me, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess they've understood it now, to say, hey, this is just something from their part of the world. But I remember being so shocked at the casuality, I would say, right? The
Yeah, yeah.
casualness of
Mm.
interactions between students and, their professor. So
Professors.
that was a big one for me to say, wow, you mean, life can be this way, which,
Mm.
people think about culture shock as per all the more trending towards not negative, but almost like, oh, I can't believe this. I do think that was a good one. I think that, I've always been a very egalitarian centered person. So as much as titles are great, I sometimes don't believe that's what breeds respect, right? So um, I didn't think that that was a bad thing, right? I could get used to it easily, even though it was shocking because we're talking about culture shock. But I'm just trying to say that over time, right, I've come to recognize that respect is in the individual and not necessarily because of the plethora of titles that a person holds or not. So that was a good thing to have learned coming from a place where status and title was very highly esteemed, and where if you didn't use it for people, it was considered a form of insult, as it were. So that's the professional side. In my mind, the social side for me, Dr. Mo could speak to this a little bit more. It wasn't too bad. And the reason was because I came to school in a black city, as they call Philadelphia. So there were a lot of Nigerians there, I think is what I'm trying to say. So just having people, from your part of the world, a lot of them residing in a town or a city, it helps ease, I would say, that shock a little bit because, for people who visit a place of worship on Sundays, you're immersed in home, in that idea of home. So that helps a little bit there. And also maybe having one or two students from your country in the program, that also helps from the social side for me. And the identity part, I think that's always evolving because the fact of the matter is that you're still a foreigner, right?
Yeah.
No matter which way you put it, yes,
Bracket,
naturalized
yep.
citizen and all,
Mm-hmm.
but you're still a foreigner. And we understand that, which is why when we say we're going back home to
Back home,
Nigeria,
yeah.
even though Nigeria is no longer home in a physical sense, but it's home in a heart sense,
Mm.
right? So yeah.
okay, ma'am. It's nice to hear your thoughts on that. Dr. Mo, how about you?
Yeah. So I will give you guys a picture of my response to your question would be based on the gyrations I've made. So just
Mm-hmm.
to put some context into place, I moved from Lagos to Austin in my 20s, and then Austin to Oklahoma, which is a totally different, it feels like going to another country, and then Oklahoma to South Korea. Now, when I landed in Austin in my 20s, I had a pharmacy degree from the University of Lagos, top female in my class. I was trained, I was competent, I had worked hard for everything I had. But the way the things ran in Austin was so different. Like Dr. Otito was saying, I remember my professor telling me to call him by his first name, Kenneth. I'm like, never, you know. And American people, they always say great question to everything. And you spend the first 6 months trying to figure out if they actually mean it. The feedback culture, the email culture, the way you advocate for yourself in professional spaces. None of it was how I was trained, in the US. And you don't have a manual in Nigeria, so you don't have a manual for these unwritten rules. Just have to watch and absorb and then slowly build everything back up. And then I'll talk about social power later, but then moving from Austin to Oklahoma, smaller city, different energy, different racial dynamics. Now in Austin, I was in a bubble because I was in a school environment. My world revolved around my school. I lived in student housing, grad student housing. I did things like a student. So it was like a living in a fish pond. But it was a lovely fish pond. Now moving to Oklahoma was different. Came there on my first, full-time job as a tenure track professor. And the city vibe is so different than what I had in Austin. And trying to build that all over again. Felt like rains and repeats. And now in Korea, before I came to Korea, I spent 9 years learning about the culture, learning the language, absorbing a lot of information from my Korean friends, but nothing prepares you. Like you feel like you're told to sink or swim. And because I came with so much knowledge, there was also that pressure to really confirm because Korea is, excuse me, there's a lot of the relationship here is so hierarchical in everything you do. There's respect is embedded, even the way to talk, the way you move around. And so that's the professional part. Now, socially, Lagos is loud. Lagos is relational. People show up at your house unannounced, and that is love. Personal space is a foreign concept. I remember one of my friends who's a psychiatrist said he didn't know how much his mental health was, mental health can be a big issue until you move out of Nigeria. Because those micro conversations that people have with you without your consent in Nigeria, like, auntie, brother, smile now, as they're walking out of your house, you've had like five people just say something to you. But you move to these other countries where it's so different, And I
Right.
think Austin was my first experience of American individualism. People are friendly, but friendship takes time and deliberate efforts in a way I was not prepared for. And I was in my 20s. It wasn't like I came like on a school holiday as a 13-year-old, I have this toy, I have this Lego or Barbie doll, let's play together. No. 20-something-year-old in a new place without friends, that is hard. That is hard. You can have a perfectly pleasant conversation with somebody, see them again next time, and they look at you like the conversation never happened. You
They
know,
don't remember you.
they don't remember you. Meanwhile, you thought you connected, you know. And Korea is a whole new world. The social codes here are layered and it's beautiful. It's completely opaque if you don't speak the language or understand the culture. They let you pass by so many things. But then there's also that age hierarchy that determines everything. How you speak, how you bow, how you receive and how you give.
Yeah.
And even though I've been learning the language for almost a decade now, I still have moments of social bewilderment that reminded me I'm still a guest here. I welcomed one, but I'm still a guest. And lastly would be identity. This is one that I think hit the hardest for me and the one no one warned me about. In Lagos, I knew exactly who I was. Proudly Nigerian, firstborn daughter, Yoruba, all of those identities had weight and meaning and a whole community to hold in. In Austin, I became an immigrant. F1 stamped. It limited my gyrations across the country. For 8 years, I couldn't even leave the country because I didn't want to enter visa issues. My I-20 was valid and all that, but my visa had expired, and as long as you're within the country, you're good. But once you leave the country, you have to start applying for visa again, which I didn't want to do. I was African, I was Black. None of those were my identities I had chosen, but it was certainly the most visible things about me. Oh, you speak English so well. The way you talk, you have an accent, you know. And I'll say Korea brought a completely different kind of identity disorientation. I mean, here I'm visibly foreign in a way that is more visible than anywhere else. But I don't have the racial stress that came with living in the US. I don't have it here.
Yeah.
I mean, your blackness is noticed in ways here that are sometimes curious, but sometimes just leave you alone. And they're not performing. My problem with the US is that they smile at you, but you know that underneath all of that is just performance, right?
Mm.
So yeah, I have so much to say, but I'm just gonna stop for now. Sorry about my voice. I am just recovering from allergies.
Yeah.
Sorry
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Okay. While Dr. Otito was doing her introduction, she said something about the grief that is experienced when you migrate, and that's actually something I planned to ask both of you about.
Mhm.
So I just like her to
Mhm.
expand more on what she meant by that grief.
Whew. I think, you know, to be I think when people talk about culture shock, that is the grief they're trying to explain, actually. This is what I've finally come to realize, that yearning, the longing, for what was, for what you left behind, and just that gap, right? I would say the gap between who you are now and who you used to be, and just wanting a collapse of it, right? So it's hard, like Dr. Mo was saying, to leave everything you've known, but then it's also exciting. So it's not like, anticipatory grief, right, where you're thinking, okay, this is going to be hard, and so it's more the excitement that leads first. It's when you then land, then you realize, oh my, right, is this what homesickness feels like? And it's such a paradox, because it's not as though you want to get on the next plane back home the way it was when, for those of us who went to boarding school, like if your mother and father had showed up the next day, you would have gone home with them. Like that's how the boarding school, pining was. But as an adult, you're like, oh yes, I'm not going to go on the next plane and go back home, right? I paid a price to be here, whether it's through exams, whether it's through the lottery, right? No one came here just, metamorphosed into being an immigrant. Like there was a path and a price that, one had to pay. So you knew there was no going back. And I think it was part of it when you realize, okay, this thing is semi-permanent, right? And by semi-permanent, I mean that you can always reverse migrate back home. But at the time you're coming, you're not just going to give it up and leave. So that grief, at least for me, one of the biggest ones was leaving my friends, right? Leaving the place where I worked. I really, really loved my workplace, where I was working at the time. And so, yes, I was excited to go, but I remember, wow, it was just very crushing just to think about the fact that I'm not going to, see these people in this form again. We've all moved to different places. And the thing about, immigration grief or migration grief is that, very deep down within you that even if you went back, things will not be the same again. Like in my place, I'm
Right.
talking about my workplace, almost everybody left. It looked like
I've
almost
left, yeah.
everybody left. So it's not like if I had stayed, a lot of those people would have left anyways, so, but still you keep pining again for, this sense of self. And then the friendship, like, Dr. Mo was saying, and the loneliness, that sense of loneliness that sets in, depending on the city you go and depending on where you go. I happen to have my siblings, I would say 100 miles around me, so I could take a bus and go see them. So it was a little bearable in that sense. But yeah, just all those losses that you've had to carry, for people who were working, you had to sell things, I had to sell my car, all of those things. You had to just really tie things up with a bow in order to come, especially if you were coming for school, because you knew it was, like I said, semi-permanent. You're going to be here for a minute before you started thinking of any other thing. So yeah, I think it's, a form of grief, of that thing of, yes, I want this new life, or I asked for it, I'm here, but at the same time, the old one beckoned for a time, right, until I could handle both things in both in both my hands, as it were. Yeah.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Mo, do you have anything to
Mhm.
add to this?
I mean, yeah, I mean, like you outlined, the griefs can be in those three phases, like the grief of living, the grief of return, and then also carrying those multiple losses at once. So when I left Lagos for Austin, I was excited. I had worked for the opportunity, and you know that in Nigeria, getting American visa,
Mm.
sometimes it's worthy of testimony in church, right? So, but there was loss, I had just gotten married. I was gonna leave my new husband back in Nigeria, and then just come to Austin by myself, where I didn't really know anybody yet. I left my brothers behind, my mom, my dad, and it was hard. And even leaving my friends, my co-workers. And every time I go back to Lagos, I still try, and even back to Austin, I still try to recreate that moment or that space I had in my head where they were, like almost like a memory locked. But it's never the same. I go back to Austin and it feels like I'm just going to a new place all over again. It's also that grateful return, right? Um, yeah, like the city was the same, right? Whenever I would go back to Austin or Lagos, the people I loved were the same, but it also changed, and I had changed as well in ways I could not fully articulate, and they had changed in ways I had not even witnessed. I remember some of the songs I had on my phone were so outdated. The slangs I would say whenever I go back to Lagos. I'll give you a funny example. So I told you it took me 7 years to go back to Nigeria, and my husband took him 8 years. And the first time he went back, I went back with him. He had one lace to church. Apparently, and this was a lace he had sewn, 8 years ago. Apparently, men don't wear laces anymore. They wear senator. So after a while, his sister had to pull him to the side and said, "This is your lace. By the time you're done, just give it to me. You're never gonna wear it again." And then explained, Meanwhile, in his eyes was like, "This is a lace that anytime you wear it to church in Austin, people will comment, oh, this fabric is so cute."
Exotic.
Yeah, exotic, exactly. Um, but there's that grief, right? And now that I'm in Seoul, I'm leaving in a few months, and I already feel it. The anticipatory grief of leaving a place
Yeah,
that has given me so much, the research, the
yeah.
culture, the language I've been learning for nearly a decade, the community I found here. And there's a version of me that would stay here. I don't know if I will use this analogy, Horcruxes by J.K. Rowling, like your experiences or people that are around you, every time you interact with them, there's a part of your soul that gets saved in them, almost like recovery points. Every time I remember South Korea, I will remember this experience I've had, this whole life-giving experience I've had. And I'll leave her here. When I go, I'll grieve her quietly on the flight back to Oklahoma. I've been playing a lot of scenarios in my head. How's that flight gonna look like? And one of my friends, by the way, she's the one that has been the most help to me since I've moved here. Shout out to her, by the way, Eugene. She has offered to come see me off at the airport. I didn't want anyone knowing when I was going, but she finally, she was very insistent that she has to come see me off. And I know it's gonna be emotional. I want to just leave quietly, like I came in quietly, but I won't have that. But that's okay. But I know it's gonna be a lot of grief just living here. And lastly would be the carrying multiple losses at once while you still have to keep thriving. This is the part nobody sees. From the look outside, there's a series of wins. I was this girl who grew up in tenement homes in Shomolu, Lagos, moved to Austin, to Oklahoma, now to Seoul and in Fulbright. What a journey, what an achievement. And it is, and I'm genuinely proud of it. But there's also, inside that journey, there's also a stack of losses that I've been carrying the whole time. The relationships that I have lost, just with time and, whatnot. And the version of myself I had to leave behind at each of those standpoints or border points, right? And the guilt of being the one who left while people I loved stay behind. So yeah, but again, this grief doesn't cancel the gratitude. They can both coexist, right? And I want to give myself permission to hold both at the same time. Yeah.
Right. I think one thing that will be hard to accept will be the grief and the gratitude being like they can actually just coexist. One does not cancel the other. You don't have to be grieving completely, and you don't have to forget what you left behind too completely.
Mm. I'll say the bigger the grief, the bigger the gratitude. or vice versa.
The gratitude. Okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Momo, when you were speaking, you were saying something about when we were talking about like social effect of when you move, the
Mhm.
social culture shock of when you talk to someone today and tomorrow when you see them and they
Hmm.
look at you like they don't know anything. I found
Still
that
can
so
corroborate that
amusing
now.
because
Hmm.
once you talk to someone, it's like you instantly become friends. You see them on the road,
Family,
you're
yeah,
like, hello,
yeah,
how are you doing? How was your day yesterday?
yeah,
So
yeah,
wow, I can't imagine like that kind of such big difference.
yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, I think it's not, I don't know how to explain to you. It's different here in Korea, right?
Yeah.
Um, in Korea, they don't talk to, okay, these are just what's the word, generalizations. If a Korean approaches you on the streets, avoid them. They're probably trying to recruit you into your cult. Because for the most part, they just ignore you. Unless they have a reason to talk to you. You can be walking beside somebody, like desk mates, and they might not say hello or hi because they've
Wow.
always been. But that's okay. And if they're not
Yes.
saying hello or hi to me, it's okay. It's the one that you've had a full-on conversation. You know the name of their dog and their puppy, and the next time you see them, they don't even reach you, right?
Correct.
And I would say that in if you think about just the low context, high context culture map, that book on culture map, right? Um,
Mhm.
like Lagos is high context, is relational, you read the room. I think US for the
Mm-hmm.
most parts, there's that they have it's a low context environment. But my fear has always been they go they pro- they they go they want to seem like people that go the extra mile, but
Mhm.
it's still fluff at the end of the day.
Mhm.
What do you mean that we've had this long conversation, we've chatted, and the next day I'm saying hi and looking at me like that never happened? Which is why for me, in Korea, I was patient enough to know that relationships won't happen overnight.
Mhm.
So I did a video some weeks ago about how I've joined the pickleball club here. And the person who brought me in told me about the rules, and I kind of had an understanding of how to, I'm not a crazy person. I won't do anything crazy, and all of that. But I couldn't be a member right away. Now in the US, the moment you
Mm.
pay, you become a member. You have the money, you
Yeah.
become a member.
Mm.
Here in
Wow.
Korea, no. I couldn't be a member right away. They told me I had to
Yeah.
wait. And I knew what they
Mm.
meant. If I were not settled in my mind, I might think they were being racist towards me. No. I knew what they meant. They wanted to see how Korea will call it gear, which is like the thread that runs through all of us. Our thread
Mhm.
has to match.
Oh.
You won't believe that I just was given the permission to be a member just this week, and I've been playing with them for months. But I'll
Mm.
go as a guest, and they would invite me. I could come in as a guest and play as a guest and do all of that. But the moment they said it was okay for me to become a member, I felt like I had locked in because I wanted to see me coming regularly and see how I interacted. If I wasn't gonna make the team dynamic, no amount of money I had was gonna buy me the membership.
Mm.
Which is why if a
Mm.
Korean loves you, if they finally see you as a friend, there's a word for it. They
Stayed
call it jong.
lifelong. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
lifelong. So I'm okay with that kind of relationship, not the ones that are finicky and performative, like we sometimes have I'm not saying everybody in the US is that way, but the way friendship and relationship, it doesn't work with my style. And I didn't like that very well, which is why a lot of my friends, my deep relationships are people that were international people or
Yeah.
Americans who had
Mhm.
international experience. We got
Experience. Yeah.
along very well, better
Mhm.
than people that didn't even have any understanding of, how I walked or how I. So I understand them and I try to meet them halfway, but I know that this person can give me what I want, and I don't see it as a big deal. I just don't expect much anymore.
Mhm.
Wow. Wow. And I think that's, from a belonging point of view, because, my whole life works about belonging. That is one of the saddest statements to make when you say, I'm not
Yeah.
expecting anything from you. from an interpersonal relationship point of view. But
Expectation
that's
is
what we have to
premeditated
do.
disappointment. Is that not what they say?
Yes, it is.
But that's what one has to do, right, in order to keep
Yeah.
forging along. And that is a part of grief when you're saying,
Yeah.
I'm in this relationship, but I'm not expecting anything from it. That is grief, right? Where you're almost like forced to coexist, and you know that we're doing this because we have to, not because we want to, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
there is that part. But thank you for sharing, Dr. Mo.
Of course. Of course. And I feel like we have
Yeah.
never addressed the racial tension in the US.
No,
It
no.
is
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
so pervasive. But it was
I feel like
pervasive. So
it's
pervasive.
become one of those things that is almost like part of the fabric of life. Like you can't,
It's unhealthy,
I don't
man.
think you can speak about the US without that thread, right? Which is then what makes it so different when you go to another country. And what you say is true. I what's the word? I really saw that when I went, to Seoul. Like they'll leave you
Mhm.
alone. And to me, I'm like, you're right. I'd rather be left alone, right? I already know I'm a
Yeah.
stranger.
Yeah.
I already know that I'm a stranger, you know.
Yeah.
You don't have to tell me anything. But yeah, then trying to make me feel actively, as it were, like I don't belong, then that is an issue in my mind. So yeah, thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like
Okay.
we sorry, one quick one. In the US,
Mm-hmm.
we talk a lot about, we don't see color. Number one, that's a lie. But the way people relate to you sometimes, you can always tell that it's not really, how will I put it? Yeah, they filter everything through racial lenses, which is so
Yeah.
stressful. And I didn't know how much of that stress I was holding on
We
to.
were carrying. Mm-hmm.
Ah,
Mm-hmm.
good God. Like you're
Mm-hmm.
in a room, you have to smile the tension
Yeah.
because you're
Yeah.
the black person and then but what here in Korea, nobody cares. Which I
Yeah. And
know
I
it
think,
seems very and it feels negative, but
yeah.
I don't mind it.
What 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 makes it, I would say, so stressful in the US is again this pervasive idea that it's in your mind. Like, no, we are not like that. We don't believe ourselves to be that way. But then that it comes the question of intent and impact, right? Like some of these things are very subconscious, in as much as that sounds so cliche. And so it's like you're not the person who has to bear this in your bones or your body, right? So you can't tell me that what I'm experiencing or seeing or perceiving is not real, you know?
Right, right, right.
Yeah. So I think that's what makes it so stressful because people try to make it seem like you are the one who is seeing things
The race,
um
yeah,
when there's
yeah, yeah,
nothing to be seen,
yeah.
Yeah, because right now I'm preparing a talk and I remember some of the excuses, some of the illustrations I want to make. I've had to rethink it because I said I don't want anybody who listens to this talk to think that it's about race. But on the
Yeah.
other hand, it is about race. There are certain things you see and there's no other way to explain it, right? I was listening to a woman who was speaking on a podcast and she said that yes, this is not, it's not like you're talking about the law. It's not like people are breaking the law, but that really as humans, we owe one another the duty of care.
Mm.
I think that's what it is, right? Where, yes, you may not talk to me, but you respect me as a person. Like you
As
just
a
see me, okay,
person,
this person
period,
is,
period.
a person, period, right? There's
Yeah,
nothing plus or minus
yeah, yeah,
there. So yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
You don't want to know the irony of it all, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, like the US, racism often invisible to the people enacting it, Talk about microaggression, we don't see color here, blah, blah, blah. Now, in Korea, the dynamic is completely different. They might stare at
Okay.
you, they might even touch your hair, they might say things that will be considered offensive in an American setting. But sometimes it comes from curiosity, and I'd rather take that than contempt. Like, Christian, and
Mm-hmm.
nobody's telling you it isn't happening. There's no gaslighting. And that
Mm-hmm.
experience is overt rather than covert. Covert. And for me, overt is easier to navigate than covert. You know who you're
Mm-hmm.
dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that race is invisible in Korea, but what that
Mm-hmm.
the particular American brand of racial anxiety and denial is absent. I'm not being watched as a threat. I'm just being watched as a curiosity. And those are very different experiences. And people that are
Yeah, very
mostly
different
curious,
experiences. Yeah, in
they're
the
older
body.
Koreans that have never, because again, this used to be a hermit kingdom. It wasn't long ago they opened their borders to foreigners coming. But the
Yeah.
younger generation are more open.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And in America, I feel like people with no conscious racist intent still participate in systems that produce those racist outcomes. And when you name it, they deny it because they are judging by intent, not impact. And that denial is what makes it so maddening. But in Korea, the impact might also be real. People stare at you, but nobody's pretending that it isn't happening.
It's not happening. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. So
Yeah. True. Yeah. Okay. Do
I don't
you
get
have
me
any
started on
other
this topic. I have
questions?
so much to say.
I know, right? We could take a whole podcast on that one. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, this has been so nice. Really kind of like the last question mainly
Okay.
is in what way have both of you been able to build community over time, even with the culture shock and the differences in the way you've moved and the places you've moved to, and the places you've been? How have you been able to build your little community?
Well, the fact that this community exists, I would say, is a testament, right, to both of us as co-founders, because we met at a meeting. We met at a meeting
Right.
for
Almost 10 years
pharmacy
ago.
professors. Yeah, we met at, almost 10 years ago, 2016.
Mm.
At a meeting, no, 2018, I think. So
2017,
almost 10 years ago. Yeah.
2017. You were my first meeting,
17. Yeah, right.
2017. Yeah.
Yes. 17. Yep. 17. So, we met at a meeting, and again, it was that Nigerian factor. I looked at her, I'm like, this woman looks Nigerian, and I went to say hello to her, and we just hit it off, right? So that was that. And so for me, if you were to ask me as a person who is in the academic setting, and I think if I were in any other profession, I would do that, right? One of the ways is to attend your, professional meetings if you can, because not everybody's interested in that. But if you're talking about meeting people beyond your tiny sphere of influence, then it requires you going out, right? Out of, I would say, your comfort zone. And that is the one thing that I have tried to do. So when it comes from the putting in the work part of it, right, I know I've put in my bit of the work, but I can only control my own end, right? Again, I've gone for dozens of meetings since that time. Many people I've met, the relationships didn't continue. With Dr. Moore, thankfully it's continued, and here we are today. So I don't push it, anymore. And I don't, and I've stopped internalizing it to say, oh, maybe it's something I did or said. It's just the system we live in. When you live in a very transactional society, people are bound to be transactional. There's no other way to be. So I've understood that, implicitly, and I just take it for what it is. But that's how, either, through church, through volunteering, again, through professional associations, through community gatherings, maybe in my own, town or things like that. That's how I've managed to do it. But then always the first port of call for many, many diaspora people, especially Africans, is church, because you will meet your people, right? There will be people who are speaking your language, who everything that feels like home, the food, everything, right? So there's always that. And so that's why, religious spaces, at least for people of diaspora, I don't think they will ever go as a third space, because that's where you meet people. And then from there, you can start to, branch out, right? And I always say, yes, in as much as, we're immigrants, we came into this space, I don't think it's also good for a person's mental health to try and force your way into belonging initially, which is why the third spaces I keep talking about, like church, become a soft landing spot for you. Now what happens is some people then integrate in there completely, and like they don't want to have anything to do with the dominant culture of where they are from, which I don't think is the best too, because you work with these people. It's not like you own your own business or you do things that way you're not interacting with them. After all, you are, in their country. Which is funny because the opposite doesn't happen. I don't think that a person goes to Nigeria as an expatriate and decides to just be what's the word?
When they call them expats, rather
Cavorting,
than calling
right?
them immigrants. If they call them
They
expats, rather than calling
cavort
them
with
immigrants.
people of low means in Nigeria, right? So sometimes I always say, why do we think we have to do that on the other side? But
Right.
there's a reason. It's because we're not expatriates in that
We're
sense,
immigrants.
right? We're immigrants or immigrants. So there is a reason. But I'm just saying how sometimes the expectations we put on ourselves, the people who migrate to our own countries for work or whatever, don't put those expectations on themselves. They don't even think they need to. Right, which I guess could speak to colonialism in some sense, or that colonial spirit in some sense, or the spirit of colonization. I don't know, but yeah. So again, that's it. I don't have any other, magical means. This is it, step by step, brick by brick, person by person.
Mm.
Okay, ma'am. For Dr. Mo?
I mean, I think Otito has hit the nail on the head for so many of our points. Definitely church. Um, my mom, when I was moving to Austin, she told me to find a good church. And I didn't know how much that, I mean, I just
Yep.
shrugged like, oh, this woman again. But man, I'm glad I took her advice because guess what I
Yep.
did when I came to, before I came to Soul Serve, I started lining up churches. Because Korea, one thing you find about is that there are so many cults here for such a small peninsula. And the last thing I want to be doing in my life, this is my old age, is to be entering cults. So before I even unpacked my suitcase, I had found a church and my friends had vetted it that it was not the cultish type. Now, I think to really get into the nitty-gritty of it, and then the church is a solid way. So make sure you do that right. If your faith, again, belonging is so different there. I'll say it's LGBT community. It starts really with honesty about what you actually need. You know, when I got to Austin, kind of like a fish in a pond, I thought community meant finding other Nigerians. And yes, that
Yeah.
mattered because you wanted to survive. And there's something irreplaceable about being in a room where you don't have to explain yourself, where the
Yes.
references land, and when somebody says something to you, and your whole body relaxes. But then with time, I learned quickly that shared nationality is not the same as shared values.
Yep.
You can still
Yes.
be in a room full of those people from home and still feel profoundly alone. And again, so it's important to ask yourself, what do you actually need? So be very honest with yourself. And it's smaller than you think though, because when I was in Austin, I tried to do things in a big way. I went to all of the events, groups, associations, and some of that was useful, especially for communication and learning what was going on in the land. But the relationships that actually sustained me were not built in groups. They were
Yep.
built in one-on-one conversations that went somewhere real. One person who really asked me how I was actually doing and waited for the real answer. And then the next day when I saw them, they didn't act all weird, like it never happened. Or somebody who knew I was struggling and then helped me out. Or a friendship that started over a shared frustration. Again, I'll say that community in the diaspora is often built in twos before it's built in crowds. And that's
Yeah.
okay, you know,
Yep.
because two real connections is what more than 20 shallow ones, you
I
know.
completely agree.
And by the time I moved to Oklahoma, I wasn't the young, springy 25-year-old anymore. My patience had run thin, especially for the fakeness and all that. So, and I knew I had to start all over again. The part I hated was just the starting all over again. Because nothing bores me out than the routine of just building a relationship again. Because I was tired. I'd already done this in Austin. I knew how long it takes, how many awkward coffee dates you had to go through, how many, let's totally have lunch sometime. And it never happened. So I still went anyways. I showed up because I knew that, from experience, belonging is not when you show up. It happens before you
Yes.
even show up, but you have
Yeah.
to be consistent. But Korea has taught me something different. I think Korea for me solidified everything I've known as a Nigerian and an American.
Yeah.
That you cannot build community the way you have done it before. And this is where the cultural humility comes into place.
Yeah.
The only thing that's happened in Korea is that I'm older now and I'm wiser. But I had to unpack everything I had learned because there's a language, but I speak the language, but they don't expect me to speak it. So when I speak it, there's a shock that comes on them before they finally want to engage with me. There's also that cultural distance because Korea for a long time, they drew wall about who was in and who was out. Every Korean was in that wall, everybody else was outside.
Outside. Yeah.
And their language is They will say Uri Nara, Uri Nampion, Uri Oma. Koreans will say my mom. They'll say our mom. They will say our country, our husband, you know. So everybody outside of that world was an outsider. So I'm still an outsider in Korea, no matter how much I love the country, you know. So, and I'm also here temporarily. So all of it made my usual strategies feel very inaccessible. So I had to get creative. I wasn't here to seek friendships, like, make new friends. Luckily for me, I had made Korean friends before I came to Korea. So I just leaned into them because Koreans are very wary of making friendships because they have their friends since we were little. So it's hard for you to break into that mold. So the one-on-one conversations, the one-time thing, that was okay for me. So I've made camaraderie on the pickleball courts. I volunteer here in Korea. I've gone for language exchange program. Luckily for me, I have a bit of cash or money, as you say. So I've paid for tutor services. I actually paid somebody to my cultural tutor. Think of it like you're paying somebody to be your friend. But that's okay. We take the classroom outside. We go to the market spaces, we go to coffee spaces, we go to events. And she's my peer. So she tells me about things. How do you converse? I learn a bit about the language. I learn about the cultural nuances, And none of those you can't do that in the US. What are you going to pay? How much are you going to be able to afford, Which is why in Korea, I had to think about how do Koreans think and how do I break into that more? And lastly will be vulnerability. You have to be vulnerable. You have to be vulnerable. You have to admit that this is hard. And for me, with the temporal nature of being in Korea, I didn't have to act like I was here temporarily because it didn't matter to Koreans that I was here temporarily. I still wanted to make my mark felt, and I still wanted to be genuine in my intentions in how I interacted with them. So, because I never know when next I'm going to come here, I never know when next I'm going to meet them. So I didn't want to act like, "Oh, what's the point? I'll just be an ostrich bird in my." So again, you have to be vulnerable. That is hard. And hopefully that will be very, very helpful. Yeah. So, but it's worth it. Community is worth it every single time. I refuse to do life alone. I don't care. I hope I will never end up in prison, but wherever you are, do not live life alone. That's just my whole spiel. It's worth it.
Wow. It's been nice hearing from both of you. Yeah, and building community, I think that's still like the biggest issue with like migration and building community, finding home people and all that. It was
Building the
very
right
nice.
kind of community. I'm going to come in and say the right kind of community, which I think
Context.
Dr. Moore was trying to allude
Same.
to, because I tell people, I'm like, as a migrant, you could come in and you will be in the community where they say, oh, it's only taxi driving. Not that there's anything wrong with taxi driving. Taxi drivers have a lot of money. But you get what I'm saying. Let's say you were, white collar worker in Nigeria and you wanted to come here and had those aspirations. You might now find yourself somehow in the community where they're like, yeah, that's impossible. You can only do X, you can only do Y.
I'll be a
Right?
nurse. Go and do
So,
nursing.
so you kind of have to decide, is this what I want? And if it's not, like she's saying, you have to find the community where they can help you, put wings to
That's
your
what you want.
dreams so they can fly. Right. So that's quite important. And this is where I'm going to say that when people talk about privilege, I can say now that I was privileged to not be in that kind of space. What do I mean by that? I came straight to school. So I've always been in the academic setting. My husband is always saying to me, you have not experienced the country. He just wants me to know that you have not experienced the country.
We haven't left school. I even professors, we haven't left school.
But then I tell him I'm like, well, you haven't experienced the school here because it's not the same as where we are coming from, right? Like you would not be able to, you wouldn't survive it. You're not going to be able to survive the sense of alienation and competition and all these kinds of things that can come up in certain spaces. So, I guess people make do with whatever space they're in. But I'm basically saying that a lot of my experience has been, in what do you call it now? In like closed off spaces But it's not like you don't get to meet people in other places, church and all that, right? But if it was for work experience, it's this semi-corporate, semi-everything. You don't even know what to actually call it. But yeah, a little bit of a bubble there. But it still doesn't make it that one is not aware of what is going on, right? Because being able to break into the mold for community, you need everything we've said, regardless of where you're working. Yeah.
Oh, can I just add something?
Yes, please.
And I think this is a piece that completes the picture. So when you finally get there, when you have done the work, released the outcomes, found your people, built something real. Now there's a
Help
temptation to
somebody.
just stay there to protect what you have built and not look back. But I want to challenge our listeners to become torches. You know, for me, I never ever would forget what it was like being a student at UT Austin and trying to adjust there. The things that saved me, the church community, the international friendship programs, volunteering, I still do them.
Yep.
You know, I have gone severally to pick up new students at the airport, take them shopping. I host international students. Heck, half of my Korean friends that I'm enjoying the privilege of staying in Korea and feeling like a local was because I met them 15, 16 years ago. And I remember the one that said, wow, we still kept in touch, but you've been so helpful to me. Now, why? She's like, when I was in America, you drove me everywhere. You invited me over to your house. You cooked for me. Those things meant a lot. I didn't know how much it meant to them until when I moved here and I realized, wow, if I didn't have these people, life would be so hard for me in Korea with a mom and two kids. But they made it so
Because
easy for me.
you sowed seeds, you sowed the seeds, right?
At
This
that
is
time, I
kind
was
of,
never thinking of seeds because I knew
yeah.
how desperate I was. So
Mm.
please, when you arrive at that self-determination, the moment you finally know who you are and all of that, please recycle it back to the community. Not even recycle. Open a door, crack a window open, volunteer, sow the seed back, show people your roadmap, host students. If you don't have the privilege, get it, maybe mentor, be a coach. Keep it churning. Be the community people, be the person you wanted to have had, or the person you had many years ago when you arrived newly in that space. And I feel like this is my life's mission because it's just a natural thing for me to do. I can't see a student in need or an international student that needs friendship. And I don't want to lean in. I look forward to those opportunities. If I still do that in Oklahoma, so please let's keep it going.
Yes, and that is the perfect way to end this.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping it going. Because when you talk about belonging, it's not just from the inside, it's from the inside out. Like, when you find your place of belonging, you kind of help others find theirs as well. And that's what community does. It gives us the opportunity to do both, to find our sense of belonging and then to be able to offer it to others. So thank you, Dr. Mo.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Dr. Otito.
Thank you, Dr. Mo. Thank you, Dr. Otito. It was really nice to have you here. It was nice to take a peek into what your life has been like, moving, changing places, meeting new people, new culture, and all that. And so that will be the end for today. Thank you all for showing up. Thank you for being honest in the chat. That's what makes this gathering actually work. Because like everybody speaks, everybody says what they have experienced and how life has happened to them. So the recording of today's community gathering will be sent to our emails once it's done. So you can come back whenever you need a reminder. If you're feeling a little down, if you're thinking, will I really find my community? Or I should just be a donor. As Dr. Otito has said, do not do it. As Dr. Mo has said, do not do life alone. It's definitely life is harder if you do it alone. So we hope today helped you. And if you know one person in your circle, maybe you stumbled on this recording by mistake, maybe on Spotify, and you know someone, a friend, family member that you know would benefit from this, please share it to them, bring them in, let them listen, let them find comfort, let them know they are not the only one going through it. People have gone through it and people have been able to find their own community, find their identity, find their belonging. home away from home. So yes, please. So we're building this community one gathering at a time. We are ORAR, Roots and Routes, a Black diasporan community. Yes, we are a community. We bring your shared experiences. We put it to light. We let people know that they are not alone in what they are going through, and we walk them through it one step at a time to help you, whether it's in your professional life, whether it's in your identity, you're trying to find belonging, if you're a parent and you are thinking of how can I parent my children in my culture, outside of my culture, anything it is, anything, we are here for you and we would love to help you through it. Thank you very much.